Hey, what's up, everybody? Thank you for downloading this episode of We Got This with Mark and Hal. If you are new to the show and hearing me speak for the first time, welcome. And if you've only been with us for a little bit, then let me tell you that the network we're on, Maximum Fun, is listener supported. And at the end of March, starting March 18th, we've got Max Fun Drive coming up. That is a chance for you to directly support this show. So wanted to put that out there. It's coming up. But for now, please enjoy this live episode of We Got This with Mark and Hal. Producer Ken Plume, everybody.
Hey, everybody. Hi, everybody. How many of you, if he hasn't asked this already, are familiar with We Got This? So is there anyone who is not familiar with We Got This? So a few people. So We Got This is a show hosted by Hal Lublin and Mark Gagliardi, and the show decides once and for all a final decision on topics like, should you put ketchup on a hot dog? The answer was no. Toilet paper over or under, what is the best Star Trek film? Any debate that you can possibly consider, they have rendered a judgment or will render judgment on. So you're going to learn what tonight's topic is shortly, and the very special guest will join them. They will come to a final decision. There will be some arguing. So Hal will be coming out shortly. And there's Mark. Hi, Mark. Just wave to everybody, Mark. Mark's going to be out in just a second.
I was actually going to go outside and around to come over to this side and see these guys, but you yelled at me, so I might as well walk.
Oh, okay. So in just a moment, I'm going to bring out Hal and Mark, and they're going to introduce their very special guest. So is everybody excited? Thank you for coming out on this lovely foggy night. I'm assuming you can't see anything outside right now. So let's just, we're in a void where it's just us. It's just that exists right now in this moment tonight. And I'm so happy that I'm together with everyone that I can't see in this theater because these lights are blinding me. So I'm assuming that it's full to the rafters. So again, a big round of applause for the hosts of We Got This with Mark and Hal. Please welcome to the stage Mr. Mark Gagliardi and Mr. Hal Lublin.
What's up, everybody? How you guys doing?
Hello.
How many of you have seen us do a live We Got This?
I already asked this while you were in the bathroom.
Oh, okay.
I swear.
Great.
They all have. They love us.
Thanks.
Some of them found out about us here at Pensacon.
Oh, groovy. So,
I'm very quickly looking to see who suggested this topic.
When you do that, when we do a live show, we want to fool. You are a small but mighty crowd right here, and when we do a live show, we like to fool our podcast listeners into thinking we are playing the largest stadium in Pensacola, Florida. So, do we have our theme song?
Nope.
Okay, so we're just going to, we'll plug the theme song in. Trust us, you guys, we have a great theme song. And we will start with just a giant, uproarious cheer of applause, and we'll fool everyone into thinking that there are hundreds of thousands of you. How does that sound? Great. On the count of three. We ready? We rolling? 1, 2, 3.
Hello, I'm Hal Lublin.
And I'm Mark Gagliardi.
Since the dawn of humanity, one issue has gone unsettled. With the fate of the world in the balance, we're here to settle, once and for all. Sci-fi or fantasy?
That's right. Don't worry, everyone. We got this.
Podcasts should have a theme song. Podcasts should not have a theme song. Yes, they should. No, they shouldn't. They sound good. Yeah, but people are just going to skip past it. You know what? You're right. We got this.
Hello,
Pensacola, wow. What? The energy. I know.
Please sit down.
We can't. You know, it's crazy. The people at home can't see that we're in a 3,000-seat theater that is packed to the rafters.
Yeah.
They had to turn people away.
I know. Well, we had a spillover crowd out front. We're starting a little late because we had to go out and talk to the spillover crowd for a little while first because they didn't get here in time to get one of the 3,000 seats to this. I love you too.
We are here. I love me too. I'm learning that through therapy. Full disclosure, we both thought that this was happening tomorrow night.
Yeah.
I talked a little bit about it, but I want the people to hear it. So we were like, what topic will we do?
Yeah. Also, full disclosure, it's cool. We went to improv school.
Yeah. Don't you have your bachelor's in improv?
I do.
In doing improv?
Actually, no. When we went through the Second City Training Center, you get a certificate that is they went straight for, you have a master's degree in improvisation.
Yeah.
After like several 8-week courses. I was like, oh, y'all can write whatever you want on this piece of paper? I'm a PhD of improvisation.
Pretty? Yeah, take your shirt off. Pretty hilarious doctor. All right, we have a special guest here with us. We are so thrilled.
Yes.
Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Orlando Jones.
What? Say hello to the 3,000 people.
Wow.
There must be 3,800 people in here.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Thank you for agreeing to come on here and join us in this.
Well, anytime I can come hang out with 3,000 people in a church, I want to be there. In the name of Jesus, so thank you for having me.
There is a service starting very soon, so we've got to get out of here in time for them to light the candles.
I'll make sure I don't say anything sacrilegious.
Perfect.
Yes. Welcome to Sundays in Houston. Just 3,000 people packed into a church.
So Hal, what are we going to discuss today?
Well, we're at Pensacon, which is both a science fiction and fantasy convention, among other things. So we decided, Tom Kinzer, one of our listeners, suggested science fiction or fantasy.
Is that a question?
That is the question.
That is the question
Science
for the
fiction
next 45 minutes or so.
Oh, science fiction.
Science fiction
or fantasy.
Or fantasy.
Yeah.
Yeah, but I don't know how you answer that question. Sometimes it's both, isn't it?
It is sometimes both. I think that's a good thing to bring up.
I mean, American Gods is particularly science fiction and fantasy.
Absolutely.
It's both.
How many American Gods fans we got out here?
Right? You know what I'm saying? Like, I don't know what to do. Like, I got to call Neil Gaiman and go, listen, you need to choose, dude. This book is both, all right? We can't be, can't be both. It has to be one or the other.
Well, if they're lumped together, like any place you go, whether it's Netflix or a bookstore, science fiction and fantasy are always together. Like there are differences. Star Trek is very clearly science fiction.
Absolutely, not fantasy.
Lord of the Rings very clearly fantasy.
Absolutely.
The Xanth novels by Piers Anthony. Also very clearly fantasy, which I loved. And then as I got older, I realized, oh, he's just a horny old man writing fantasy books.
Yeah.
Have not gone back to them.
It's the Canterbury Tales revisited.
Yeah. Let's have a contest tonight.
Chaucer.
All you ladies line up for me. We're in this bar. We'll get you drinks or whatever.
Yeah, I'm not a part of this conversation.
Canterbury Tales. Yeah, exactly.
We'll be over here at the other end of the bar.
So there are things like American Gods. Star Wars also kind of skirts both of them. Let's define first.
Okay.
What exactly is science fiction and what exactly fantasy is? Because I think even something like Star Wars, at a certain point you can say it is either one or the other. I would say it's more fantasy using science fiction to tell its story. Because it's not really about the science of Star Wars. They're not like the Kyber crystal stuff came about way later. And nobody really, even though Han and Chewie spend most of Empire trying to fix the Millennium Falcon, they never get into it like, and then we're going to fix the engine here and do this and that.
It doesn't have the Trekkie nerdiness. It doesn't have the actual science as a basis for the storytelling, right?
Yeah.
I mean, is that one of the big differences, the sci part of it? If you add an element of magic to a thing, then does it become fantasy at that point?
For me?
Yeah.
I would argue that, I mean, there's fact and then there's fiction, right? So
Right.
I think, you have to in some way base it on science as the basis for what you're altering, right? So if you can't just base it on nothing, that's fantasy, right? It's just entirely made up.
Yeah. Well, how exactly does this time machine work? It just works.
Yeah, dude, I did that movie, Trust and Believe. I had that discussion. The moment I was like, listen, there was a weird part in Time Machine, if you've ever seen the movie, where Guy Pearce's wife dies, right? But when you see her get hit by the car in the movie, it's the funniest scene in the entire movie. Because the car hits her so fast, it's like one of those little whoop, bam, and she's dead. Sure. So when we were testing the movie, that moment happened and the entire audience fell out laughing. Like audience the wife is dead. And then he's depressed that his wife died and is trying to save her. And I'm like, that's to me where the line is, right?
Right.
It's like the death should have been tragic, but the way they rendered it, they made it comedy.
Right.
So it moved into this fantasy and took you away from the core science fiction of Time Machine because they destroyed it by, sort of turning it into a comedy moment, which should have been a heartfelt moment.
Right. Now, as an actor in a science fiction work, do you generally are you more of a guy that asks questions about that kind of stuff? Like, how exactly does this work? Or you're like, you know what? It's all in the script, what they've given me. I don't have to worry about this. Because I imagine something like the Time Machine, a space-time continuum conversation would happen on set all the time. Or maybe I'm just the kind of nerd that would want to constantly just talk about how
fantasy. No, that was they don't want to talk.
No,
to you.
I'm living in a science fiction.
Fair enough. Yes. No, not at all. Not at all. In that realm, I think, you're so focused on shooting. There's so many people on set. There's, in a movie like that, there's 400 people standing around.
Yeah.
And they're not trying to hang out with you, They're like, get this shot done so we can move on to the
You're
next
on
thing.
hour number 16 of the day, and you're like, actually, if I was in,
my character's motivation, I don't feel as the compendium of human knowledge that I would have that particular piece of knowledge is not something you should say.
Right. Because what you will get back is, we're losing light.
Yeah.
We gotta get this
hurry
shot.
up, dude.
Yeah.
Hurry up. But, on American Gods, I think we have a lot of those conversations. And the conversations are frankly more character based and less, theoretical, right? It's really, how does this character fit into what's going on? What is this character hiding or attempting to accomplish or what have you? And it's sort of focused on that. And the other components of it are sort of lesser important.
Right.
I mean, even for Gods, if you really look at it, Nancy is moving through time because he is on a slave ship, when you meet him during a period of time that he couldn't have existed. He's not even dressed for that period of time.
Right.
So how does he move through time was not a discussion that they had, but it was a discussion that I had with myself.
Right.
I was like, how did he get here? Like, how did this happen? This person prays and then he shows up. So what's the mythology that made him show up? Is that mythology science fiction or is that mythology fantasy?
Right. And do you share this with the other actors and the director and the team, or is this something that's strictly for you to know what's going on?
It's mostly me and Jesus just hanging out, talking to each other.
Sure.
I mean,
the most American of the American gods.
Exactly. The most American. I always feel like that conversation, with Brian Fuller and Michael Green, we certainly, talked a lot about those aspects of it. But when you're in the process of shooting it, man, you're in the belly of the beast. There's no chit chatting.
Doing it.
Yeah, you're doing, and at that point, it's a 15-page speech. So nobody was trying to chat with me. It was 105 degrees outside. The air condition was broken on the set. So at that time, the focus was literally, I run from my trailer and I do a take and then I run back to my trailer to stop from sweating through my outfit.
Oof.
So that was pretty much,
this monologue is really fast in the final product. Why is he doing it so fast?
Exactly.
Yeah.
So, that's, the contingencies of the day tend to take precedent.
Right.
And hopefully you have a, creative team that's talked to you about that before. But a lot of times actors get thrown to the wolves because they kind of ask you to figure that out on your own.
Right.
Sure. Yeah, they don't have time. You need to have done this already because it's cost us thousands of dollars to do.
Well, we don't get, I'll put it to you this way. It's always like, I love Daniel Day-Lewis, right? But I'm always amazed by when I hear him talk about his work because he's like, I spent 2 years studying cobbling, and then after that, I'm like, they paid you for 2 years just to study cobbling, and now
you wrote me these pages this morning.
I'm like, exactly right, So I'm like, hey, we got this. What time is it? At 2:00? Okay, we got this at 1:58. They gave you 2 years of prep. They gave us 2 minutes. So you often don't have that sort of luxury, and most actors don't get that luxury. So you're trying to do obviously your best work. American Gods is not a situation like that. We obviously had some time, but in many cases, you just don't. You're in the machine and you're moving down the road. So that's how it was.
I'm kind of curious, just sort of what all of our backgrounds are with sci-fi and fiction, just growing up, because my dad is
as fans.
Yeah, my dad's way into both science fiction and fantasy, which is something I inherited from him. But I would put him more on the sci-fi spectrum, just because of when he grew up was during the '60s, where it was more of Star Trek and a lot of trashy. I mean, there are trashy fantasy and science fiction, but Asimov, Ray Bradbury, those things that are way more planted in things that where the scientific rules of the world are way more important than like the planet Zarlak is where the dragon lives and his fire will one day bring warmth to our people.
To our people!
Our people! Yes! I definitely am more, I enjoy sci-fi more, but I think I went more towards fantasy. I played D&D. I like that role-playing world. I like being immersed in something that's so fantastical that it feels like it could never actually happen. And that I think is the joy of fantasy, is it's a complete escape rather than science fiction being, Star Trek, not only it showed us what the future might be like, and it inspired a generation of scientists to create things like cell phones that look like communicators, to work on, how can we make these theoretical things a reality? So that's sort of where I'm coming from for this.
So you see Star Trek though as fantasy?
I see it as science fiction. I see it as a picture of what the future might be. It is possible these things could happen.
But as science fiction.
But it's science fiction, yes.
Yeah, because I think I'm probably more science fiction than I am fantasy, because I think there's something interesting about basing it on the actual rules and evolving from there, rather than just, making up the planet Zorlak, and the pockmarked dragon. They ate the orange ball in the sky. Like, okay, that's great, but like, what are we talking about? Like,
right.
So I think I enjoy the basis, and I think primarily because I think a lot of what science fiction speaks to with me is it talks about obviously issues and elements of society that we are still grappling with today. And, the ideas of representation and I think are still very much a part of the science fiction world. And they're able to talk about it in a way that isn't divisive, and isn't finger pointing. It's more of just sort of looking at what the rules, more or less should be. So I think I'm more attracted to that than I am fantasy, but,
It seems like science fiction exists. Science fiction knows that it is a work of fiction that exists within the realm of our world and is being done for a reason other than escape. Fantasy feels like fantasy films and stories, and I would put, Harry Potter and Star Wars and Lord of the Rings and all these. These to me are, there are parallels to real life and to humanity, but it feels like those are a thing that you escape and go and watch. A really great science fiction work, something like Black Mirror, or some of these things that look at the world. I think science fiction has a greater responsibility to look at the world and say, like you're saying, how do we make it better?
I mean, good science fiction,
right.
Yeah. I mean, absolutely.
Going back to Orwell, even like these are
1984.
This is looking at what the world could be like.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the Altered Carbon, I think I enjoyed for that reason, right? It's science fiction, that component of science fiction. It annoys me, however, that people mix them together, though. I'm like, that's just ridiculous.
Science fiction and fantasy?
Yeah, I mean, when they are mixed together, like in Gods, that's one thing, but just the mixing of them, just because you're some marketing jackass that don't know the difference, so you know what I mean? Throw them all together. I mean, it's comic books. What are you talking about?
Science and religion teaming up. Nothing's ever gone wrong when that happened, right?
I don't see that working out so good. Yeah.
When I watch the Marvel Cinematic Universe, they try to ground everything in science. Even the world of Thor, the cosmic, or Doctor Strange, the more mystic stuff. Yeah. They try to go, this is science that we don't know yet, and these people have figured out how to harness it, rather than...
Yes, and that's annoying a bit, because it's not science, it's mythology.
Right.
Is what it is, and it's culture and mythology, and how that mythology and culture has evolved and how it's evolving now is what I like. What I hate is that they're trying to actually make me think that this is science when I already know this isn't science in the first place, and don't confuse science and mythology. Like, why did the mythology exist is a more interesting component to look at to me than trying to convince me that this is really science. Like, come on, dude, that's just ridiculous. I mean, that's just an insult to my nerdiness, you know what I mean? Like,
I agree.
You know what I mean? I'm a real deal nerd. Like, I can't help it.
What is your favorite nerddoms? Like, what nerddoms did you come up in? What do you like now?
Oh, dude, you got time for this madness?
Yeah.
I mean, I think I tend to like, let me do it backwards. So, like I'm the captain of the Jolovany ship in the X-Files fandom. I'm captain of the Elicity ship in the Arrow fandom, captain of the Destiel ship in the Supernatural fandom, captain of the Ickaby ship and the Sleepy Hollow fandom, Clone Club Forever. I'm a fandom nerd. So, I think what I enjoy about all those different pieces, I really like the slash that often gets written. I really enjoy that fans are able to take those characters and not have to be beholden to the canon of the way that this group of people saw it, and that canon can be shifted and merged to approach, talk about, and shine a light on people that often don't get talked about, right? Because when we talk about these issues, it's always black and white and male and female, as if that's really the breakdowns of who we are. It's, I think, more complex than that. So a lot of my fun is with West Allen and The Flash and all of that in fandom is because there are little elements there that I think represent things that are being overlooked, right?
Yeah.
If we want to go back to the beginning, I think it sort of is how I started. Like, I remember my mom saying to me, do you want to go see Star Wars? And I was like, lady, that's the lamest name for a movie I've ever heard. I'm not going to see Star Wars.
I like that you call your mom lady.
Yeah, like lady. Yeah.
Listen, lady.
Listen, lady. Yeah. Whenever there's something she doesn't want, I don't want to do, she's like, I'm gonna take you to see Star Wars, baby. You're gonna love it. I was like, look here, lady. Know where the hell you came from with this stupidness, but I'm not going to see no movie came Star Wars. And so I was really against it because I thought the title was lame. So my mother took me to 291 Pleasantburg Drive, the Cinema 8. I will never forget it. It had velvet walls, it had maroon velvet walls, and I was like running my fingers along the walls, mumbling to myself, like, I hope 1,000 trillion million elephants come and trample this lady to death, because I did not want to see this stupid movie. And by the time Star Wars was over, I was pretty much on my seat, like, I need a lightsaber. Yeah. I feel the Force, Mom. I feel the Force. Like, I was in.
Yeah.
And when I saw Billy D. Williams, it was like I had never seen myself in that world before. So for me, it was transformative at that. Wow. I lost my mind. So, you know, I wasn't thinking about any of the politics or the way we talk about things now. I was just a little kid looking up, seeing something that I connected to, and that made me want to go do that, right? So I see myself as a 14-year-old fangirl because that's really what I am.
That's great.
I had all the squeeze. I had all the feels. That's actually who I am, right? So I don't know what it means to be like a celebrity. I don't know what that means exactly. I'm still the 14-year-old fangirl I always was.
Right.
So I can't pull those things apart. And I look at what I love still like that person, right? So I've chosen all those different fandoms because a lot of those fandoms get made fun of. People are always going, Jillian and David are never going to be together. Why are you? And I'm like, it's not about that, stupid. It's not about that. We get to choose. We get to choose, you know, because I got to choose, right? At that moment as a kid, I got to make that choice. And it was an important choice for me, I think, as a young person to be able to do that. So my fun in fandom and also in science fiction and fantasy is about circling that. I think it's how I started.
Right.
I don't know how to pull that apart. So I just kind of have left it where it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I tend to stay there. So, that's my fun a lot of times with, stuff that people crap on. Cause they say the CW shows are crap. And I'm like, okay, you know, and American Gods is high art. Okay. You can believe that if you want to.
Right.
But I see it more like this speaks to me for this reason. This speaks to me for that reason. And I don't need you to get why I'm an Earper. I don't.
Right.
But I love Winona Earp. I don't need you to have to figure it out. You know what I mean? So I think I like the fact that, you know, we as fans can make the rules up as we want, and we kind of get the middle finger of the machine a little bit. And I like the middle finger of the machine a lot.
Sure.
Cause I think that's what it means to be an artist on a certain level is not to conform to all of that. So, you know, I'll fight about all that stuff all day long, but I think that if that answers your question, I feel like that's kind of how I view it. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Yeah. You bring up a really good point of representation. Mark and I are both part of a podcast called Welcome to Night Vale, which is
one of my favorite podcasts.
There you go.
That's where I know you guys from.
Well, there you go. There you go.
I don't know if you remember this, but if we're being totally honest, I actually hit you up on Twitter and I was like, I want to be on Night Vale. And y'all were like, cool. And then I never heard from you for a minute.
We don't make the decisions.
You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, right? You know what I'm saying?
Jeffrey, Joseph, this is on you.
Yeah.
But you know what I think is great about that show, and I started hosting a podcast for them called Good Morning Night Vale, co-hosting, where we sort of go through and talk about it. And one of the things that
what happened to the 3,000 people? That was a smattering of applause. What? Thank you.
Sorry.
Now all 3,000
I
are on board.
appreciate that. One of the things that strikes me about that show is that one of the things that helped it hit such a large audience is the fact that it embraced representation, not in a way that was like, look at all the people we're including. It's like, why wouldn't you have these different characters? Why wouldn't you have a gay character or a trans character or a person of color? Like, these are all the people in the world. And I think fantasy has a huge representation problem because it's almost always like, here are some white people in a castle.
And orcs.
And orcs.
White people and orcs.
Maybe we'll have a person of color play an orc for us. We'll put them behind makeup. You'll know from the voice. By my bushy red beard. I mean, it is like every book cover you see looks like it's white people. It's white people, white people, white people. And that is
fantasy.
Look, on behalf of
Yeah.
white people, I'm getting nervous up here. I just take it easy on white people.
as the duly appointed spokesperson for all white people, I'm here to tell you that you have a problem. That is a huge problem with if you make Lord of the Rings, they don't all have to be white.
Listen, I would agree with you, but I think what's worse, to me, it's less about the color element. It's like disabled individuals are normal.
Yes.
They represent 20% of the population.
Yeah.
Yet, literally, we hire able-bodied actors to play disabled roles and then give the able-bodied actor an award for pretending to be disabled, as if there are no disabled actors that could carry off that role and bring a truth to it, a joy to it that we don't expect, right? Because it's your able-bodied version of disabled, right?
Where it's all about, where the whole point is being disabled.
Right.
If you've been disabled your whole life, your whole point is, I'm going to play a funny character, or I'm going to do
you
whatever.
have more insight into what it is. You actually know what it is. This person actually doesn't know
Right.
what it is. That's blackface by and large, right? That is, but that's 20% of the population, and we're still talking about white people to a certain degree. I'm like, what about disabled people? Like, there are so many other groups that are lost and that aren't being talked about in the conversation because the storyteller isn't seeing the world through the eyes of that character. The storyteller is seeing the world through this able-bodied normal lens. And I think that's, to me, what's daunting and what's messed up. So there's an inherent judgment or an opinion about what's going on. And for me, that's really what's unfortunate. I wish that we could just move past the sexuality, the gender, and the race of it all so that we could get down into the humanity of it all. That would be more interesting.
Yeah. Amen. And that feels like something that science fiction has an advantage in going back years. I mean, looking at the original Star Trek.
Absolutely.
And you've got the story of, you've heard the Dr. King story about, what was her name?
Uhura, Nichelle Nichols.
Nichelle Nichols. When she was going to leave the show to go do a play on Broadway. And he cornered her and was like, you cannot leave this show.
Right.
You have to stay on Star Trek. And if Dr. King, who is going to have his own holiday, tells me to stay on a television show, I'm going to stay on that television show. But that feels like a science fiction thing. Fantasy to me, like you were saying before, it's because it deals in non-humans and non-fact-based things. And I will say though, another thing that fantasy has going for it, that I think is on the plus side is, for this whole genre, this science fiction and fantasy genre, imagination is a huge part of it. And one thing that I think fantasy work has going for it over science fiction work is an unbounded imagination. You can absolutely start with a blank page, and we were making fun of it before that it's like, well, how exactly does this work? Doesn't matter, get on the dragon. But there's something fun about doesn't matter, get on the dragon.
When it's constructed well, right? When
a world's created.
When the world is created
sense.
well, right? When they do, a not so great version of it, then it feels like you got short shrift, right? It feels like they're just trying to capitalize on something else that was a success.
Right.
So what is the perfect version of fantasy? Because I'm curious if you took this is the perfect representation of fantasy in media. It could be a film, television series. It could be a book. Is there something that pops into your head right away when I say fantasy?
Naked. Everybody should be naked. That's right.
That's right.
Yes. That should
just
be,
cherubs.
Yeah, you know what I mean? Just nakedness would be kind of awesome. Just, I think it would be awesome for fantasy because then you would have to actually imagine that they had clothes on.
There you go.
What?
It'd be awesome. You're walking around, you got no clothes on, and they'd be like, what's going on right now? You'd be like, they're naked. You need to imagine these costumes.
Yeah. Imagine
this is fantasy, stupid. That's 8-year-old me, but literally, that's what I keep thinking.
But 14-year-old you was like, quiet, Star Wars is starting.
Look, it's like
Feel the velvet.
Feel the velvet. Oh. Feel the velvet.
Hey, lady, when's this movie start?
Listen, lady, look, I love Game of Thrones, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think it has, we're in a church, so I'm going to try to say this as nice as I can. It has the perfect titties to beheadings ratio. Right?
Sure.
Right?
Yeah.
As soon as you get bored, they kill somebody, they cut his head, ooh, titties. Oh, they kill somebody, ooh, titties. Oh, they kill somebody, ooh, penis. So I feel like that's how I watch it. Like, squirrel, titty, squirrel. It's just...
Those were lines I don't remember from Up. Dog just turning away.
Yeah, just squirrel. I do the dog and just the breast titties. Instead of watching Game of Thrones, it's amazing. Oh, that person got beheading. But they seem to have it on a clock, like every couple of minutes.
Yeah. Look, it's not TV, it's HBO. They know what they're doing.
Yeah. It's like the fountain at the Bellagio. It's timed perfectly.
Yeah,
Is that where Excalibur failed? The movie Excalibur? They didn't quite have...
No titties, no beheadings.
And it was also like, what if the whole Arthurian legend was in soft focus? If you've never seen Excalibur, you will think somebody rubbed Vaseline over your eyes.
It's soft focus.
You'll be like,
is Excalibur the one with Richard Gere? No, that's First Night.
That's First Night. This is Patrick Stewart. But you're like, is this Zsa Zsa Gabor in this movie somewhere and I missed it? Is this a dramatic scene is somebody dying in a soap opera just near, like right off of frame? It's
interesting
awesome.
that you mention Arthurian legend because you say what's like the ideal fantasy. If you look at fantasy, for me, it's like, I think it's indistinguishable from mythology a lot of times. Like, a great fantasy is going to need to have created a mythology.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So, I guess like, for me, the ideal version of a fantasy is like, the hero's quest with plug in any mythology you want, whether it's the overnight trip when you die in ancient Egypt, and all the gods in the boat, or if the pantheon of the Greek gods, and which interesting that American Gods is a perfect sort of.
Yeah, I know. It's like you're describing Neil Gaiman's work.
Yeah, but it is.
He does the perfect thing. Neil Gaiman. That makes sense.
Mythology is the perfect form of fantasy, and I think
I agree. It's fantasy, but it's based on something.
Right.
And I think it's rooted in sort of the culture of the time and the beliefs of the time and where those beliefs sprang from. I think is obviously an interesting way to look at, fantasy and mythology. But, the perfect, like, that's above my pay grade, please.
Right. It's like, it seems to me like, science fiction, is focused on the what and fantasy is focused on the why. Does that make sense?
I think that's fair.
okay.
That's fair.
Yeah.
So, I mean, if we're going to
You smart.
pick one of the
Isn't he smart?
I am flying by the seat of my
You
pants.
smart.
He's pretty too.
He's handsome, ain't he?
You should see him with a beard.
Really? Listen,
Yeah.
could you take your shirt off?
Smoke show. What's the deal with that shirt?
Yeah.
Where are we
You know
on
what
that?
this show needs? Well, look, if I'm going to show my titties, someone's going to have to get beheaded.
Wow. First of all, sir, we are in a church, and I'm totally offended by the fact that you said that. I can't
Are we?
believe
Is this in fact
It's
a
a house
church?
of the Lord. It was.
This is a
At
church.
one point, it might still be.
Wait,
I mean,
it is a church, is it not?
it's
Thank you
currently
very
a
much.
church.
They
Oh, there's
still
a cross
have
right
services.
there.
Oh, there's a huge cross right behind me.
Oh,
Is
wow.
that why my back was
I'm not
burning?
going to hell. You see what I'm doing, right?
Oh, I can't. I'm so glad I'm sitting here saying all this with a giant cross looking over my
I
shoulder.
wondered what you were doing.
Like
Yeah.
Nosferatu.
Why,
It's just.
why you think I was over here slapping I'm like, he going to hell? Cross is right there. This fool just talking.
I don't know if you noticed that cross has two eyes that are just like doing this at you the whole time.
Hey,
Jesus been following you around the room like a painting this whole time. Like,
I'm Jewish. I've been on an express train since birth. Following me around like I'm a shady teenager in a store, like at a CVS, just watching. Is he gonna take those Charleston chews? We have to pay for those. Those cost us 30 cents a box. We're flipping them for $1.20. This is how we stay alive.
That's what you'd go for if you were going to rob a convenience store? is a box of Charleston chews. What year do you live in?
That's right. I mean, you may as well have said now and laters and gobstoppers.
Yeah.
Charleston chews and gobstoppers and now and laters.
Yeah. Watch a commercial, Hal. They've made more candy.
They have.
They're
they
these
have.
two adorable M&Ms.
Tell him. He don't understand.
Now everybody gather around. We're going to get these jujubes out of here. We're going to do it fast.
I think
Mike and Ike's.
I heard the word jujubes is offensive to Jews, so go easy right there. I'm just
I can say it. It's okay if I say
No,
it.
you can't. No, you can't.
All right, you're right. I apologize to everybody.
Quick, now hide these dots in your teeth. Can I help you with anything, sir? No, I'm okay. I'm just trying to get out of the store.
Is I know this is what we're talking about, but the most grandma candy is Good and Plenty's, right? Because it's black licorice.
Werther's Original, I feel like, is the grandma candy.
That's
that
the
was
candy
mine growing
grandma
up.
gives you. The candy grandma eats
This is when
is
she
black
hoards?
licorice. Because like during
We
the
ain't got the
Depression,
same grandma, obviously.
What kind of candy does your grandmother have?
Grandma didn't give me no damn candy. My grandma baked the cake and told me to shut up, sit in the corner. I'm going to bake you this slice of cake, baby. You enjoy this slice of cake. Now, don't you make no mess, because I will take that cake from you. Hear me? Okay, now sit down and shut up over there in that corner and make no mess with that damn cake.
I mean, sitting in the corner got you cake, though.
Did you hear me arguing? Listen.
They're right.
Let me say, in my world, when a black lady tells you to do something, it's best just to do it.
Yeah.
It's best not to go trying to think for yourself. It's best for you to follow the rules.
Yeah.
And then I found that you should just do that generally with women, because they tend to be right. Because when all the blood gets engorged into other parts of our body, we don't make the proper decisions. I said that clean, Jesus. I said that clean. I'm not going to hell. I'm not going.
I think Jesus feels the same way about engorged as that he does about like the word
It's a
moist.
safe word, engorged. It's a total safe word.
Yeah.
my grandmother would eat Good and Plenty's, and the first time I had them, I was like, "Is this medicine?" It was that bad because black licorice is
Black
not
licorice is
candy.
not tasty.
Yeah,
No.
that's the depression. If the Depression were a candy,
That's
the
true.
Great Depression, it would be that. It'd be like, this is all we had. We picked roots
Yeah.
up from the ground and chewed on them, and we liked it.
Yeah.
That's right. Like, why you got to make the black licorice nasty? Like, what's that about? That's why I was like, really? Why are y'all giving me this? This tastes like. I mean,
This is
Yeah. My
and
grandma,
I'm
the
not
only
saying
thing
that to anybody who enjoys.
Black
Just for
licorice,
me,
sure.
it wasn't
Yeah.
great.
The only thing my grandmother ever pulled out of her purse was insulin and cigarettes. And I think that's probably better than black licorice.
Wait. Did she?
Insulin and cigarettes.
Insulin and cigarettes.
Can we just sidebar this science fiction
Yeah,
fantasy thing
please.
and talk about your grandmama for a minute? She has a diabetic issue.
Diabetes.
Yeah.
She had diabetes, and it was always jarring because she'd just be sitting and talking. I'd be telling her about my day, and she's and yeah, working it out. But, oh no, well, so grandma, yeah, it was.
This ain't heroin, baby. Go ahead.
It was jarring to see.
Oh, that's true, baby. That is so true.
At school Grandma, are you sure it's not heroin? Does insulin make your eyes roll back like that?
You talk too much, baby. Go sit in the corner and eat that cake. Go eat that cake in the corner.
Did she? Now, the only image I have of your grandmother in my head is her injecting insulin into her body with a like mostly smoked cigarette just dangling.
No, she smoked the insulin.
Oh, wow.
She injected the cigarettes.
She used Juul, our
Yeah.
new sponsor of vaping.
Yeah. She used new Juul needle vapes.
I was driving, the other day, and somebody on Sepulveda was vaping in their car, and I saw the cloud of smoke come out, and I thought their car was on fire. That was my first thought. Was like,
That's a lot of smoke.
I'm about to see it explode. It's so much smoke.
Is it one of those ones where they got like the brick and they do the whole big cloud
I
thing?
don't know. Those are the really weird, because they look like the same. Isn't there like a machine for cold sores that is the exact same thing? So I look at them and I go, oh, they must be treating themselves. If you go to the CVS,
Wait
they
a minute.
have a thing.
I'm sorry.
Orlando,
looks
you
like
thought
that
you were going to be
box.
talking about science
Am I
fiction and
crazy?
fantasy.
I'm not
Dude,
crazy.
He said machine for cold sores. We need to go back here. What machine for cold sores?
This is science fiction at its best.
Okay, gotcha. Keep going. All right, now you got me.
Yeah.
Okay.
The cold sore machine.
cold sore
It's
machine.
the same thing. It looks like a.
It's Ron Popeil made that.
Yeah,
didn't
Ron.
he?
Because once you get a cold sore, you just set it and forget it, and it just fix that all up for you right there.
But vaping is gross. Have you ever watched videos of competitive vaping? Did you know that that's a sport?
What?
It's like, who can make the biggest cloud? This one looks like a dragon. I made a ring and then I jumped through it.
What?
And then it's the most smoke.
The only person who can make an amazing smoke cloud is Gandalf, and that's fantasy.
And Snoop Dogg. And Snoop Dogg.
Yeah.
Snoop
And
Dogg
Snoop Dogg's
is,
pretty
that
good.
is fact.
Snoop Lion is fact.
Snoop
yes.
Lion is fact.
That is, well, I've never heard of that. I thought white people had lost their mind with curling. Now they got competitive vaping.
Yeah.
Because they were in the parking lot in between curling sessions. They're like, we should make this, we should be competing at this.
Oh, wow. That's impressive. I don't get it.
But let's get back to sci-fi versus fantasy.
He makes the transition.
So what do we think are the criteria that we're looking at? If we're going to objectively pick one of these, they each have their elements. The imagination of fantasy, the real world implications and better representation in science fiction, the escapism of Star Wars. What are we looking at as the most important elements of this? The things that are going to pull one of these ahead of the other?
I wonder if it isn't possible. And I only heard 10% of what you said because I was thinking about
other things. Sure.
No, I think I'm sitting there thinking, well, is it most entertaining? Is it most based in fact? That's science fiction. Most entertaining. You can pick one from each that you think is good. So it's tough to nail down the criteria that says science fiction will win or fantasy will win. I wonder if one of these, while they both have a place in the world, I wonder if one of them is sort of past its expiration date a little bit.
Fantasy?
In terms of, I wonder if fantasy is born out of mythology, and mythology was our way of explaining how the world worked before we understood it.
Mm-hmm.
So the sun, instead of it being the star around which all the planets rotate, that's Apollo in his chariot, in his fiery chariot, riding across the sky every day. That is a great story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm more interested in a story about the fiery chariot guy who rides across the sky than I am in the actual truth of the solar system. However, once you figure that out, then you go, what would it be like to travel to another planet? What technology would that involve? What might we find there? I think you can add something like Aliens or Alien. Alien is more of a horror movie. I think Aliens is a little bit more sci-fi action. That says, all right,
Sci-fi action horror.
Yeah, sci-fi action horror. There's no way we're alone in this universe. There have to be other races of aliens, and they could be whatever we might imagine. So what would it be like if we lived in a future where we had the science to go visit these other planets, and just like modern day, corporations are in the way and they're just trying to make money.
Right.
Like that is a great way to extend a little bit of fantasy into science fiction, but it's still more based in things that we've done that were a quest for truth than well, let's explain it all away. Here's why there are waves in the ocean. It's because the water god is angry.
Right.
I think we're at a time fundamentally where people are a little bit more concerned with an understanding of how things work and a quest for the truth than
for the
fantasy
facts or the truth, because that feels like a different thing.
The truth of why the pursuit of science, I think, has made. I think our pursuit of science is a lot stronger now than our need to explain things away with fantasy. And I know there are a ton of political and social jokes that we can make here, but the truth is we do have, we just had a rover on Mars that lasted years longer than we ever thought it would. Those quests are out there. We're trying to send people to that planet. We're trying to stretch further than we've ever stretched before. The Voyager probe is still out there sending messages
with that
back.
cool gold record.
Yeah. And as bad as Star Trek the Motion Picture is, that was the basis of that movie was what would happen if one of these, who knows what would happen if one of these Voyager probes went out and melded with something else and learned and grew. I mean, there is fantasy in science fiction already because we're imagining something that has not yet happened and what it might be. But the fact that it's grounded in things that are part of our everyday life, I think that makes it much more appealing in the year 2019.
Okay.
I'd like to point out, Hal, that when we came up with this show, the premise was we're going to settle pointless arguments. And within a month, we've gone from what's the best muffin to Did science supersede religion?
That's an interesting discussion. Look, this is my take on it is this. I think technology has fundamentally changed storytelling. And for me, that's primarily true because there have only been two forms of communication in human history. One-to-one, and one-to-many. That's kind of been it. And about 11 years ago, this many-to-many communication started up, which was Twitter or the news wall on Facebook, and suddenly 100 people in a room, 1,000 people in a room could actually all talk to each other in real time. That's never been true before. So for me, when I look at how that has changed the way humans communicate, it's science fiction and fantasy pull into that story. So I look at the fantasy part and I go, it's fun to dream up something, but then how do I take the thing that I dream up and base it in something that is plausible enough for us to believe as humans based on where we are right now that we could one day get there. And that becomes, for me, our knowledge of science. But I still think ultimately it's about which character is telling the story. And I always think of it more like a red ball on a table. And if the red ball rolls off the table and hits the ground and rolls under the sofa, and 5 people are sitting in that room, and one person is colorblind, then the ball wasn't red, so we can no longer agree on the color of the ball. And if one person was on their phone not paying attention, they never saw the ball on the table, they only saw the ball on the floor roll into the sofa, so we can no longer agree that the ball was even on the table at all. And if someone didn't see the ball at all, then we can't even agree that there was a ball ever in the room. And I think in media now, we see all those different points of view, which is truthiness, right? The different perspectives on all the news and all the spin. But what fantasy does is, to me, build that narrative, build that story, and then give us enough facts for us to believe plausibly that it could have happened. And hopefully those facts encompass the world that we live in. And that's, to me, where they're merged together in a way now that it's more difficult to pull them apart because we just have so much information.
Like science fiction becomes a means for a fantasy story to get told.
Exactly.
And make it seem believable.
Exactly. It becomes a tool that you use to make the lie more plausible, right? And then the point of view of the character that's in the story becomes the point of view that allows the character to either have seen that red ball or to not believe it was there at all. And now you're on the quest to make this person believe. But it does frame the story in a way that you can merge those things together when you look at how all those elements now factor into how we watch content. So I tend to see it as a storyteller from that point of view. That was a part of the challenge of American Gods this year. So as I was acting in the show and writing on the show and producing the show, those are the components that you're doing because I'm using Neil Gaiman's novel as the basis for how we do those things. But I still have to use the mythology of the god, this character's perspective, vis-a-vis Shadow's perspective, because he doesn't know what's going on. So I think that they kind of all wrapped up into each other at this point. But it's not like before where you could say, this thing's going to transport this person to this place, and you go, wow, that's crazy, that can never happen, because now there's so much technology. We go, well, that's plausible. Well, how would it work now? And that's I think the challenge for storytellers is for us to be better. But we're failing at that a lot, but we try. But I still think science fiction and fantasy are critically important to how humans tell stories and how kids dream and how, things get made, really. And I hope they never go away, but I don't know how you pull them apart, but I do think that there's a greater responsibility now to do your freaking homework. And try and get it right. Cause we in a church and we can't say that word. Ain't that right, Jesus?
Right.
Thank you so much. So, but that's ultimately that's my long-winded take on it is, I don't know, but I feel like that's what, we spent the last 8 months banging our head up against the wall thinking about, you can't take this out of science fiction. You can't take this out of fantasy. How does it come together? How is the audience going to see it? And how do we tell a story that, that makes you feel, that creates empathy?
Well, I'm going to apologize then because, if you have spent the last several months perfectly melding science fiction and fantasy. Our job right now is to tear them apart from one another and choose one ultimately as the victor.
Science fiction.
Science fiction.
Science fiction. Wow. We did it. People of the world, never stop dreaming, never stop imagining, never stop making things up, because the kids who do that become the Orlando Joneses and the Mark Gagliardis and the Hal Lublins of today. People who use play and use their imaginations, not only to make a living, but to create and play in entire worlds that other people can enjoy.
Yeah, and fans are doing it in a more interesting way.
Yes.
They're also creating worlds and telling stories. So I don't, for me anyway, I don't think it's about the people that become, quote, whatever famous means for it. I think it's about the fact that we all get to do it. We all get to tell those stories, and people get to now find those stories and react to them. And it's not about the celebrity anymore. It's about the passion and the truth of the storyteller. And that's what's more important now, to me, than the rest of this.
I appreciate the correction. I agree with you. No, and it's true. You use your imagination all the time, whether it's, whether you are writing, producing, and starring in a television show, or writing fiction based on it, taking ownership of things and imagining and expanding the world, that makes an impact on other people's lives and on your own. It keeps you sane. It keeps you healthy.
It does.
So you do need fantasy and in your life, but it's just impossible to pick against science fiction, because we live in an age of science, in a continuing age of reason. Certainly it's evolving. There are speed bumps. No doubt there are, but we can't turn back from our overall quest for knowledge. So to use that as a basis in our storytelling, it's essential, and it grounds us and it brings us in, and then that allows us to suspend our disbelief for when the fantasy elements appear.
Yeah, that's where cosplay comes from. That's what's so magical about cons, is that you can come to these places, you can fantasize about being these characters and shift those characters in your own way, but you're suddenly the storyteller. Like, that's why I first started coming to cons, Yeah. And I had a lucky break, right? I got to do this television show that I was a crazy fan of when I was a kid, called Mad TV. Mm-hmm. And I met, Sergio Aragonés. Yeah. And he was like, you should come to Comic-Con. I was like, what's that? And he took me down to San Diego, and we parked across the street.
Oh, yeah.
And we walked in the artist alley, and he introduced me to a world, and I was like, lost my mind, and have never, sort of left this community, really since, but critically important, right? And here he was doing Spy versus Spy, which to him was fantasy.
Yeah.
It's crazy.
100%.
But incredible. I feel, blessed and grateful for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we feel blessed and grateful to have you here with us today.
It is.
Thank you for being here.
Science fiction asked and answered. Orlando Jones.
Orlando, what do you want the people to know? Where can they find you?
You mean I'm at the Orlando Jones on just about everything. If you're lost, just go to orlandojones.com and you'll find me. Where can they find you, Mark?
Well, you can find our show. I'm so glad you asked.
Yeah, of course.
There are many more topics to discuss, so please reach out to us on Twitter at We Got This Tweets. Check out the Maximum Fun subreddit, or
email us at wegotThisPodcast@gmail.com. Come to Facebook.com/groups/We Got This Podcast. Talk about your favorite fantasy films, your favorite science fiction stories. Let's share art with one another. I never say that about our Facebook group, which is the greatest place on the internet where people actually don't fight with one another. They have fun conversations.
No flame wars.
It's great. No flame wars.
What?
Because it's all arguing about should you put mustard on a hamburger? Like, that's what we're talking about.
Or
There's
apparently,
no time for all
should
that.
science beat religion is what we got to do this time.
Now you have something to talk about. All you people who wanted us to talk about it, we have done it, but we want you to talk to us there. Thank you to producer Ken Plume in the back of the theater.
Ken Plume!
There he is. Thank you to researcher Kate McManus, graphic designer Uri Kelman, and QA engineer Jen Elba.
And thanks as always to our musicians, Jonathan Dinerstein and Mike Furman, for our score and theme song respectively. And thanks to you, our listeners, 3,000 of whom I am looking at directly in the eye right now. And to all you at home. For Hal Lublin, I'm Mark Gagliardi.
And for Mark Gagliardi, I'm Hal Lublin, and don't worry, everybody.
We got this.
We got this.
Thank you.
Thanks, Orlando.
Have you ever watched a movie so bad you just needed to talk to somebody about it?
Well, here at the Flophouse, we watch a bad movie and then talk about it.
Yeah, you don't have to do anything. We'll watch it and we'll talk it. We do the hard work.
Featuring the beautiful vocal talents of Dan McCoy,
Stuart Wellington,
and me, America's Rascal, Elliot Kalin.
New episodes every other Saturday at MaximumFun.org or wherever you get your podcast, dude. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Welcome back, and thank you, Dan, for that scathing report. As you know, Max Fun Drive is coming up March 18th to March 29th, which has some folks pretty excited. But as families around the world get ready to celebrate this season of giving, community, and quality podcasts, some are wondering if it's just too much.
Are they, though?
They are. Some people are all for comedy and culture, but with 45 shows offering hundreds of hours of bonus content, plus all the Max Fun meetups taking place around the world, some people think it's too much.
While other people think it sounds totally awesome.
I took my granddaughter to the mall to get her picture taken, and the mall pod ferry was short. And I'm just gonna say it, I'm sorry, but everyone knows the pod ferry is tall.
Well, I think we should just leave it there. Until next time, here's the news you need to know. Max Fun Drive runs from March 18th through 29th. Be sure to listen to all of your favorite podcasts. I know I will.
MaximumFun.org.
Comedy and culture. Artist owned.
Listener supported.